Hey everybody, what is going on? I am Maximus Rex and this is Big Baby Reviews. Check out my comics at KINGCOMICS.CA. Check out my YouTube channel, King Comics 2021. Check me out on Instagram, MaximusRex13, or check me out on Facebook, simply Max Rex. Today's Wildcard Sunday, where we look at things and artists a little bit off the beaten path from our regularly scheduled videos during the week. So this is just something a little bit different and special for Sunday. This is basically the Batman book for an old fart like me. It's Batman the Dark Knight Master Race, the Covers Deluxe Edition, with an introduction by artist Klaus Janson. And what it is basically is just a collection of all the different covers and variants that they did for this Master Race series. First of all, am I a fan of Dark Knight Returns? Of course I am. Who isn't, right? Redefined Batman, we know that. Am I a fan of Dark Knight 2? I am, but for different reasons. And I understand the criticism, and I totally understand it. Was not necessarily a huge fan when it came out, but I've learned to kind of I don't like it, maybe not love it. But there's definitely something I like in it. And this third one, the Master Race, I read as well. Miller doesn't draw it. He kind of co-writes it with someone else. So I even wonder if, how deep his involvement is. I read it. It wasn't a bad story by any means. It was actually kind of fun, and it had that Miller vibe, of course. But the original Dark Knight is the one, right? Anything after that, just like movies, is just going to be second best, and it's always hard to compare to the original. So why do I say this is a Batman book for an old fart like me? Is I've mentioned before, I've reviewed a few Batman books, more modern stuff recently, and I'm just kind of tired of Batman and Batman stories, right? Movies I'm still kind of into. I went to see the Batman. It was all right. It's not my favorite Batman movie, but it's pretty good. Some things in it I liked, other things not so much. But that's not why we're here. We're going to talk about this book. But again, yeah, those Batman stories that I've read, same old tropes. I'm getting old, and it's seeming like a lot of repetition. So with Batman, what it is at this point is I either want to see really crazy, kooky, bootleg, insanity versions of Batman, or just look at the pretty pictures. And that's what this book is all about here. Batman, of course, outside of storylines and continuity and all that, is just a great visual who is generally very inspiring to most artists who want to draw him, right? There's just something about the look of Batman, the aesthetic, that every artist kind of has their vision and version of, I guess. And what we're getting here is basically Frank Miller's version of Batman. So even though all these different artists are going to be interpreting the Batman, they're interpreting specifically the Frank Miller Batman in this book. And that's fun and interesting. And of course, why the Frank Miller Batman? Well, we just mentioned Dark Knight, Dark Knight 2, Dark Knight 3. He's had a huge influence on the character. And of course, the original Dark Knight is the one that's had the most influence. It's influenced even regular continuity Batman at DC Comics. After Dark Knight Returns came, Batman basically became Frank Miller Batman. Maybe not so much today, but there's still a lot of his influence on the character to this day. Things have changed and kind of mellowed out a little bit maybe with the Batman character, but a lot of the basics that Frank Miller either heightened or added or established are still present with Batman today. So without further ado, I'm talking way too much. We're going to have a look inside, see what's going on there. So I'm not obviously going to read any kind of introduction or go through text. This is something purely for the visuals. And so the first thing we're greeted by is a fairly modern kind of Frank Miller Batman drawing. Love it, hate it. I mean, I can't say I love it, and I can't say I hate it. It's somewhere in between. The general aesthetic is obviously very dirty and grimy. I don't know what else I would add to that. The composition still works for me, right? I think the basic fundamentals and stuff, it's just the aesthetic on top has changed and just gotten dirtier and more grimy over the years, right? It's definitely a Sin City Batman, right? Batman now, more and more with Frank Miller, is less about the shape of the bat and more about a man putting on a Batman costume, is kind of how I see it, right? The cape is short, and it just, instead of trying to inspire fear through, making people believe you're a bat or a Dracula or something like that, you're just some crazy guy in a bat costume, I guess is what Frank Miller's doing. Which is definitely an aspect that was interesting in Dark Knight Returns and that made us kind of like it. So I don't know what else to tell you. Yeah. But yeah, the Frank Miller stuff obviously is not, the the focus of the book. He does a few covers, of course, and that's what we're going through here. I like his interpretation of Wonder Woman, her costume and everything, the kind of slight bondage aspect of it, of course, because the original Wonder Woman back in the day was created by a gentleman who was way into bondage with his wife and his mistress, and it's a long, complicated story. You can look that up. I'm not going to talk about that today. I don't know why she has a kid on her back here. I guess this is Frank Miller's lone wolf and cub fetish kind of finding its way into Wonder Woman's world, and he does, I think on purpose, depict her with that curly, crinkly hair, you know, almost kind of like Elektra, in the sense that I think he's trying to go for a vibe that she's Greek. That's kind of what I'm getting from that. Here's an interesting one, because I think the rendering's a little bit different. It's almost like Frank Miller's doing Moebius or something. I don't know how else to describe it. Obviously, there's not a lot to base it on, but just this section here actually looks fairly illustrative and quite different from what we saw before. So yeah, I don't know exactly what's going on here. I actually kind of like this one. And then back to, you know, battered and bruised Batman, beaten up, bloodied, dirty. Yeah, like he's really, and like, you know, the black lines to indicate like the folds of the costume. It's like Adam West got old and grizzled or something. I don't know. See, like a shot like this by Miller, you still get his great sense of anatomy and composition when he kind of, you know, just cleans it up a little, just simplifies it maybe here and doesn't add too much grime. This actually, to me, is fairly solid. Kind of a penis on his leg there. The Wonder Woman stuff is cool. Whoever Sinclair's doing this extra stuff in the back, like, I don't know if that works. Wonder Woman with this, yeah, this kind of abstract stuff added in the back, I don't know. I don't think helps. That's the thing, it's kind of hit or miss. Like, I think this one here is pretty cool. Almost has a slight Matt Wagner-y kind of feel to part of it. You know, if you were to draw more in this style all the time, maybe that would work, right? I kind of like that. And if you don't know, in the Master Race, Carrie Kelly, who was Robin, who was Catgirl in Dark Knight 2, is now Batgirl or Batwoman. I don't remember exactly, but I think it's Batgirl. You know, and here's an instance where that dirty kind of look, and he's going for something here in power and electricity and lightning, I assume. Like, to me really works, right? In the moment. If this was one panel that was very kind of, you know, expressionistic like this within a story in that moment, I think that totally works, right? Oh, and this is the infamous dong Superman, right? Where you can basically see his dong inside his outside underpants. This one created a lot of controversy. I mean, it's funny. This one's a bad drawing, I'm gonna say. Like, it's almost like a caricature, especially compared to some of the stuff we saw before. Don't like this at all. Sorry, because of the book, the way it is. It's hard to see his face, too. It does look like he's taking a shit. But I like this, and I like that. So there's like this consistency thing, I guess, with Miller now is what's, I don't want to say bothering me, which I just find odd, I guess, is what I'd say. You know, because I think stuff like these kinds of aesthetics could work in the right context. This looks great to me. This too, and then other stuff not so much. There's Batwoman again. Those colors, man. Ooh, I don't know. I know these are, I think this is Catwoman's color from like the 40s or something, but yeah, just ugh. And there are contexts where purple and green work awesome together, but I just ugh. Supergirl's butt seems to be the focus of this shot here. Almost looks more like two kind of hanging testicles, to be honest. I've seen him do this shot so many times. So this is Hawkgirl and Hawkman. That's a cool shot. Nothing to say against that. See here, like, he seems to almost... He's not even on... Like, on brand. That's not Batman's mask. That's not how it goes. Why all of a sudden does he have Daredevil's mask? Like, is he just trolling people sometimes? Like, and this is not a bad drawing. That annoys me, right? This is cool. The shadow, the silhouette, everything. Like, maybe not the yellow in the back there. That's a weird choice. So now, okay, we've moved, okay, I don't want to say past Frank Miller because he's still drawing these. Thankfully, they've got these at the bottom. That helps. This is Dark Knight Universe Presents Action Comics #1 cover. Okay, so we've got like variants from all over the place, not just the Master Race miniseries. I guess, you know, when Frank Miller's around, they want to get him as many covers as possible to sell as many books as possible. So this is actually Miller inked by Janson. Yeah, I could see the Miller in the composition and Janson just completely on the aesthetic saying, hey, no, I'm doing my stuff. Right? There's legendary stories about, you know, Frank Miller not being happy with some of the inking that Klaus Janson was doing on the Dark Knight originally. So maybe this is Janson saying like, yeah. I'm going to do, you know, my full-on Janson aesthetic on top of Frank Miller, just like when we were doing Daredevil, not like Dark Knight, which works out pretty well. Again, Batgirl, Batwoman, definitely better colors here than what we saw before, green and purple. So yeah, his Supergirl looks kind of masculine. Almost looks like a you know, like a drag queen, I guess. Saw this already. So we're gonna move on. All right, so Andy Kubert is the actual artist of the Master Race. So give him props because he is turning on that kind of Frank Miller switch and doing a lot more of the silhouettes and stuff in his artwork. Fairly talented, you know, he can kind of change his art style and do different things. And I think this is kind of the best of both worlds. You get kind of a Frank Miller Dark Knight aesthetic on top of Andy Kubert's already solid, you know, compositional drawing, storytelling, all that stuff, right? Andy Kubert, definitely like an awesome artist. No complaints there. So it's basically Andy Kubert riffing on and doing Miller, which works for me. So all this succession of covers again is that Andy Kubert doing a Frank Miller riff, and I think even in his compositions to a certain extent he's going for some of those Frank Miller tropes, right? The profiles and stuff. Yeah, like here, right? That's a good example there. He's even got the Miller folds on her costume, right? You know, it's just a cleaner Frank Miller, a more illustrative, more precise kind of Frank Miller, and as far as the anatomy and all that too, right? But then, like, I really like this one. This one, he really pushes it in the direction of Frank Miller. Like, he's almost doing Frank Miller now rather than, you know, Dark Knight Frank Miller or even Sin City Frank Miller. So kudos for him to be able to pick up on the aesthetic of each of those styles, right? Ooh, green and purple is back. Dear God. He's picked up on the fact that Frank Miller draws Batman with huge hands. So, you know, he's kind of incorporated that as well. You know, in a weird way, looking at him here, it's almost like, you know, when Frank Miller draws him, or at least the Frank Miller version of Batman is at least in this shot here, I find, is almost like the Hulk. The size of his hands compared to his head. His hands are bigger. One hand is bigger than his head. There's no way Batman could pick his nose. And here he subdues it, brings it down a little bit. So we get a bunch of black and white covers, or have we seen these before? Oh, these are the ones we're going to see later, maybe? No? Okay, so I guess they're not showing all the Andy Kuberts. Here we get some pretty cool stuff from Janson. This, you know, again, everyone's doing the Dark Knight version, so the short, I'll just throw it out there if you don't know, the shorter ears, the kind of, you know, brawlier, wider kind of body. But Janson's, other than that, here on the aesthetic is pretty much doing Janson. I will say, though, this kind of just outline with nothing on the legs there, I don't see that often from Janson. It's kind of something new. And even here, I feel like he's got a different kind of aesthetic going on with the silhouettes here than what he usually does. So maybe he's just trying some stuff, trying to be a little bit different. There's almost a Moebius quality to some of the lines. And you know, if you told me, I don't know if Moebius has ever drawn Superman, but if you told me this was, you know, without the signature, just Superman, you told me this was a Moebius drawing, I'm really having trouble saying this, I could almost believe you. You know, the way these lines here, there's kind of a European flavor to this whole thing. And again, this book is just all of these pinups, right? Like, just, you know, killer shot after killer shot. I don't know if I'd be into a Klaus Janson version of Dark Knight. I mean, he's doing a good job here. Pretty evocative. This one almost seems like more, maybe not so much Dark Knight, maybe more classic, you know, 70s, 80s Batman. Does have a bit of the stubble though. Not everyone throws in the stubble, and it's not like Batman in Dark Knight 1 at least always has stubble. In fact, I don't think he ever does in Dark Knight 1. Maybe in Dark Knight 2 he starts doing it. So a lot of Klaus Janson all the way throughout. Like even this one again is like very different aesthetic to what Janson usually does. I feel like he's almost doing a Brian Steel Freeze kind of look or something to it. Very cool. Nice to see Janson stretching his artistic muscle and doing different stuff, right? It's quite angular, but also cleaner than usual Janson, right? This is maybe a little bit more usual Janson with the lines and the dirt and the grime and stuff. Although even that looks different from his usual style. But that's pretty far off. Interesting. Yeah, see, like this is more what I would expect from Janson, just generally. You've basically got Batman v Superman here, the end of it, staring down Doomsday. And this is cool. You get to see Klaus Janson's just, you know, sketches before going to the final. Some of them are a little more detailed. Some of them are pretty rough. So we've got Jim Lee here. And it seems like he's inking himself here. So he, I guess, yeah, Williams, I feel like would not be able to hold back and would add a few lines here and there. And I mean, there's an ever so slight line here and whatever, but pretty cool. I always, when Jim Lee or any artist inks himself, I always feel like comes out better. He's really going hard on the silhouette here, somewhat of a Sin City style, you know, interpreted by Jim Lee, but I think it's really cool. He got the city right in the background too. So now we've got some more Jim Lee stuff. So it's the Dark Knight, the Master Race, but a lot of these shots refer more to the Dark Knight Returns, the original one, right? You'll see a few of them referring to Dark Knight 2 and Dark Knight 3, but, you know, the classic, once again, is Dark Knight, the first, and that's what they're referring to here. So this is after he's fought the Joker, right? This one is inked by Williams, as is this. So again, a little more what we're used to seeing from Jim Lee traditionally. I like this one, even though it is actually inked by Williams as well. There's something a little bit like sketchier and looser that I kind of like. Batman with a gun, right? That was always shocking. Shoots that kid, says, I'm gonna hurt the kid, or something. That's like, believe me, man. And Batman, you know, shoots him. I believe you. That's a great scene. Probably inspired the scene in RoboCop when he busts through a wall, right? Same kind of moment. And even Jim Lee is kind of, you know, his interpretation of this Dark Knight version of Batman is shifting a little bit from illustration to illustration. This one's a little more Frank Miller-y and angular and dirty and stuff. Great moment, just as the Joker dies. This one's interesting. Not sure how successful it is. Batman's quite big compared to Superman, you know, unfortunately. I think there's something a little bit wrong with the proportions there. You know, I'm not saying they shouldn't be about equal size, and of course Batman's, you know, wearing armor, but he shouldn't be bigger than Superman. At least I don't think visually. There's something like, so on this illustration here, I feel like Williams is, you know, really kind of inking more in his traditional sense, but then on something like this, he's going a little looser, which I rarely see from him. And maybe it was in the pencils with Jim Lee and stuff, but this is inked by Williams. And of course, I know Jim Lee is trying to reproduce, I know exactly the panel there, and the way Miller kind of gave the suit a bit of looseness and folds and stuff. And that's, I guess, what Jim Lee's going for here. I remember there's specifically a big fold on the pants. So this is pretty much a direct reference to that. So, you know, again, the Miller influence is in the folds, I guess, in this one. And then he goes back to much more of a kind of slightly more classic version of Batman. So it's nice to see the pencils here. So yeah, it does look like Williams has been a little more kind of faithful to the pencils than he usually is. At least it's kind of what I feel. It's a good one. Let's compare. I'm just curious real quick. It was this face here. Okay, so we decided to add all the black in there. It was there. It was indicated. Oh, there's a lot of graphite on that page. Yeah, I can see it. Yeah, very cool. This is Raphael Albuquerque. Hope I'm saying that right. I mean, not anyone I really know or that I've read many of his comics, but can't say that I don't like his artwork. It's pretty cool. Oh, so it gets a little sparser now. We got Neil Adams here, Dark Knight 3. That's funny. That feels like a mistake to me, to be honest, because it almost feels like more like Klaus Janson. Anyways, I could be wrong. That's an odd one. Or maybe Neil Adams inked by Klaus Janson? Yeah, I'm not quite sure. Mike Allred. I like the kind of detail he's kept from Frank Miller's boots, where they're just a bunch of spikes under there. And, you know, the scars and stuff on his face. It's a nice little detail. Lee Bermejo, he's just drawn the kind of more regular Batman, well, in this case, Frank Miller Batman costume. A nice kind of change from his kind of more real world version that he does with all the armor and stuff, which is cool. I like that too. Simon Bisley. This is interesting because his style has cleaned up somewhat to a certain extent. It's still typically Biz and all the muscles and stuff, but it's just a little cleaner. And I feel like he's kind of doing a really old school Dick Sprang Batman mask, which is an interesting choice and different from what he would do, you know, back in the day, like when he did, you know, Batman Judge Dredd, for example, where Batman has the longest ears and basically it looks like, you know, Heavy Metal Magazine version of Batman. Brian Boland beefing up a character, kind of odd, I feel, in his proportions, in that, you know, his shoulders and, you know, Brian Boland is just such a precise, you know, master illustrator, but I feel like he kind of missed the mark on the back muscles here. It's like Batman hasn't worked his back muscles much, and he should definitely be wider, I guess is what I'm saying. So it's interesting to see Brian Boland doing a Dark Knight version of Batman, though, and the Joker as well. Somewhat different from how he, like the mouth seems the same, but the facial proportions are quite different from what he usually does. It does say Neil Adams. Interesting. I mean, I'm sure Klaus Janson took tons of inspiration from Neil Adams. This is by Chris Burnham. Interesting. Kind of just reinterprets the classic cover from Dark Knight, the original series, with Robin and the Joker. Oh, this is fun. J. Scott Campbell. Don't see him doing a lot of Batman. It's pretty cool. And again, it is the Frank Miller Batman. Giuseppe Camuncoli. All right. Greg Capullo. Yeah. You guys probably know that Greg Capullo's one of my favorite artists. So yeah, really like what he's doing here. Always great to see his art. That's a great shot there. It's a little bit like suck on my dick, but I guess that's kind of metaphorically what Batman's doing here, or has done, by kicking the crap out of the mutant leader. It's, you know, what's fun about these is you, like with Jim Lee and with some of these artists, is you get to, well, with all of them really, you get to kind of see what was memorable for them, because you have to assume, you know, editors ask them, hey, we need a cover inspired from Dark Knight Returns, right? So like, you know, pick something from Dark Knight Returns, I guess, that you like, or your favorite moment or something. So I feel like the artists are putting their all into it, because these are some of their favorite moments from having read the series, right? Joker riding those like weird ass cybernetic baby things. I don't know exactly what they are, like garbage pail doll. Let me try that again. There's the Garbage Pail Kids, but they're a parody of the Cabbage Patch Kids. So these are like demented versions of the Cabbage Patch Kids. Great moment. Great lighting on this shot too, eh? Very memorable moment for a lot of people. I mean, you know, this is almost basically, it's an homage, direct homage, pretty much, to that panel. Even down to the depiction of the muscles and stuff. Like, Capullo's just, there's a reason he's one of my favorite artists. He's just killer. The really big yellow bat signal, all that. Love it. And there's just at least a few pages of Capullo here. And all just masterful, great shots here. This, I just want to throw out there is, it's a very memorable moment, but it always kind of struck me as a little creepy, right? I'm sure I'm not the only one, and this has been talked about, but, always wondered back in the day, if he was naked, and he basically is, so it's a little weird. It's a little weird. And there's a small detail here where, Batman's got scars and stuff. It looks like he's got a scar of FM, Frank Miller. So I guess he's trying to draw a little bit of attention subtly to the ass and the fact that he's naked, right? Something there. This classic moment as well. Very well done again. Redone, I say, by Capullo. He does something like this, right? And I think the colors are him as well, because he's done painted art before, and all the other pages were kind of the colorist was credited, so I feel like that's him painting, right? FCO Placencia is who's coloring these ones, but then you get to this painted version of Batman here. That is all Capullo. Looks awesome. His pencils is what I would have liked to see rather than his finished inked pages. Is there a difference? So, inked by Danny Miki. Top right. And Jonathan Glapion bottom left. Interesting. There's a difference, right, in the line work? That'd be good to compare at some point. John Cassaday, rest in peace. Still within his powers, I guess, when he was doing this illustration here. Pretty darn good. Very cool kind of montage, kind of all the elements of Dark Knight Returns. That's a cool one. And then we get into just less, artist not doing as many covers, I guess. We got Howard Chaykin here, who's kind of an interesting version of the Dark Knight. Frank Miller version. We got Cliff Chang here. I recognize the style. It's pretty distinctive. Pretty cool. And yeah, again, I'm just going to quickly get through the rest of the book, I guess. Amanda Connor here. Darwin Cook. Oh, I guess rest in peace, Darwin Cook as well. I'm not quite sure when he did this, but Tony Daniel, man, his style just completely changes every few years, eh? All the time. He was doing Spawn type stuff, and before that he was doing X-Force, and then on Detective Comics for a while he was kind of drawing somewhat realistic, and then kind of like Jim Lee. This guy's a chameleon. Terry Dodson always draws the ladies pretty well, right? Good job here. Gabriel Dell'Otto. It's alright. Kind of monotony, but I guess he did it on purpose. More Dell'Otto. I mean, not shabby in any way. I'm certainly not going to criticize his art. Maybe not 100% my kind of thing, but pretty cool. There's a lot of his stuff. Spot color alternate retailer variants. Are you kidding me? Oh my god. Wow. These variants. I guess that leads to a book like this when you have all those variants, but just so odd. Dave Dorman, eh? I thought he had more of a, like, it's slightly Bisley-like and exaggerated. I thought he was more realistic back in the day, but I kind of like this. It's fun. Batman swinging bats. That's pretty funny. So this is Batman climbing up a building, I guess. Have to flip it around. Don't really feel like it, to be honest, but yeah, okay, I see what he's doing there. Kevin Eastman. I like his aesthetic. Sometimes his proportion stuff, maybe, but I like the aesthetic. Jason Fabok, who was kind of a Dave Finch clone and then kind of, morphed into his own style. On the right, that's actually Dave Finch, inked by Scott Hanna. So Finch getting kind of a Dark Knight Sin City aesthetic thrown on top. So there we go. We're going to go a little faster. Gary Frank, pretty great illustrator. We've got Alex Garner here. Dave Gibbons. I'll just stop on the ones that really kind of at this point. Raphael Grandpa, I love his interpretation of Batman here. Obviously, the old Dark Knight version, completely different from what he's doing in Gargoyle of Gotham, I believe it's called. But I love some of the textures he throws in. Just these little details like the the band-aid on her knee, the loose socks, these shoes that, you know, have like little wings on them, right? These little touches where he doesn't change the costume at all, but he just adds these little extra details and flourishes that, you know, just make it really interesting. He's very textural. Tony Harris, great artist. Adam Hughes. Who's that? Michael Janine, don't know him. It's all right. Jock. Dave Johnson, I always thought was, I keep mentioning I got to do Super Patriot review. Great artist. His style has morphed and the aesthetic has morphed, but I mean, a lot of the underlying structure is pretty similar to some of the stuff he was doing on Super Patriot when I first kind of found out about him, discovered him. I really like this one. Kelly Jones doing Dark Knight is awesome. Very cool. Leave it to Kelly Jones to do light and shadow really well, right? This one's kind of interesting. Dale Keown, who I review every week right now on Pit. I did the Incredible Hulk stuff. It's an interesting version. The coloring on the stuff, like, I think at this point he's just full on. He doesn't ink, he's just pencil, and then they move on to kind of painterly colors and stuff. I don't know if I like the aesthetic that much. But Dale Keown drawing Batman, I think this may be the only drawing I've ever seen of that, so it's fun. Very, very short ears. That's pretty much taken straight from the panel in the comic, right? The pose and the angle and stuff, but that's cool. Carl Kerschel. Kerschel? It's too many SCHL. Carl Kerschel. That's a mouthful. Chip Kidd. Interesting. It's the guy who designs the books, no? All the... Anyways. By Tyler Kirkham. I like that one. That one's pretty cool, actually. Badass looking Batman. And this is more influenced actually by no, still Dark Knight. All of these guys are pretty much taken from Dark Knight, except this, right? When you get so this would be from at least Dark Knight 2. Jay Lee basically just doing Batman. He's doing his version of Batman, but kind of using the original Dark Knight Returns cover as inspiration. Different angle, but using the lightning. Aaron Lopresti. Just kind of a workman artist. What am I trying to say? Not a bad artist. You know, just doesn't stand out that much. Kind of generic, I guess. Emanuela Lapacino. Don't know. Looks alright. Francis Manipul. Scott McDaniel going back to kind of his Sin City kind of look. That he ripped off from Miller, of course. But that works for this. Josh Middleton, don't know. Sean Murphy. Oh, yeah, that's pretty cool, actually. Did a pretty good job there. Oh, and he's got a few, and he's got those memorable moments as well, right? Oh, that's cool. This added little bit, you know, added storytelling to the Dark Knight story, where we're kind of getting, we see this shot in the Dark Knight, right? Similar to this, and we're getting it again, but then we get basically Batman's view of what's going on there, right? It's kind of weird though, because this is when he confronts the mutants, right? So this and this continuity-wise don't match, but symbolically, it works. It's a cool idea. Oh yes, Paul Pope. Love Paul Pope. And this aesthetic, there we go. That's a nice looking Supergirl there. I like this. Did she have that in the comic? I don't remember. Yeah, she had something around her eye, right? Could be wrong. But yeah, Paul Pope, completely just, you know, his style. So evocative. So using these characters here, you know, the kind of things that I guess Frank Miller values, the shoes and stuff like that, are kind of similar with Paul Pope. So again, totally works. Howard Porter, his style has really changed over the years. It's pretty cool. Frank Quietly. He took the easy way out on this one. Smart. Ivan Rice, I think, doing a really good bulky Batman here. Very cool. Good volumes in his hatching. Eduardo Rizzo, his usual style, works well here. Very Frank Miller-esque as well. Very chiaroscuro is what they call it. A lot of heavy shadows, basically. Kenneth Rocafort. I mean, It's all right. Does feel though, no, I can't say that. John Romita, I was gonna say it kind of feels like they're leaving their lesser artists for the end there, but I wouldn't say that. I like John Romita Jr. for sure. He did that issue that fits in the Dark Knight continuity where we find out how Joker basically kills Jason Todd. So I think his style really fits generally. Like he's done work with Miller and Daredevil and stuff, and I find his style works really well with Miller's storytelling and writing, more so than, say, for example, Jim Lee. You know, the collaboration between John Romita Jr. and Frank Miller, way more solid, I think, overall than between Jim Lee and Frank Miller. That's Daredevil, though. The Man Without Fear. I'm not talking about the Superman thing they did. That was really weird. Another one by John Romita Jr. here, inked by Danny Miki on both. That's pretty cool. Bill Sienkiewicz, Tim Sale, Mark Silvestri. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, he's kind of making it look like Jim Lee kind of did this kind of thing a while back. Yeah, there's always something about Mark Silvestri that ends up to me being kind of slightly derivative of Jim Lee, unfortunately. At least in his more modern style and interpretations. Walt Simonson. Kind of an interesting face there. Not quite sure I'm into that. So Babs Tarr here and Bruce Timm. That's a nice, cool, old looking, you know. I haven't seen this a lot, where almost like there's like, you know, leathery cracks all throughout the bat cowl. That's pretty cool. Something I haven't seen much of. Jill Thompson. Greg Tocchini. Well, that's pretty sketchy. That's interesting. It's not that it's bad. I think it's really good, but wow, it's very impressionistic. It's a bit of a Frazetta vibe here and there in some of the application. Matt Wagner and Scott Williams all on his own. And that's how it ends, my friends. So there you have it. Just a quick, breezy Sunday, looking at some cool pictures of Batman from the Dark Knight Master Race, the covers. So there you have it. If you have any questions, comments, concerns about this book, about my channel, about my comics, let me know in the comments below. If you have any questions, some of the answers I asked during the video, let me know in the comments as well. If you are subscribed and you are still watching, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And if you are watching but you're not subscribed, please do so below. It only takes a second for you. Really helps the channel out. Helps get us out there, helps us grow, and helps other people who are like-minded like us and are into comic books find out about the channel. So thank you so much for watching. Go out and have a great afternoon. Thank you so much.
Like, subscribe, subscribe.
King Comics presents Big Baby, Volume 1, Issues 1 to 13, 204 pages of story and art. King Comics also presents Star Crasher one-shot, 32 pages, cosmic sci-fi surrealist adventure. You can find these fine comics at KingComics.CA, at MaximusRex13 on Instagram, or on Facebook, MaxRex or Big Baby.